How's everybody doing? Good? Great. We're down to mics, so I'm trying to do the, I hope I don't, I'll do this. I want the experts to have the mics. Okay, great. So you guys heard me yesterday talk about why we feel like we've been successful at the University of Miami in terms of leading the way in utilizing XR technologies in our pedagogy. And I talked about one of the reasons as to why I think that's true, and it has nothing to do with me pushing it. It had to do with professors who were going to be champions of this technology and lead the way. And I'm really, really excited to have 4 champions up on this stage from all different walks of life to just really show the brevity of areas where we are utilizing this technology. I've been told we don't have that much time, and professors like to talk a lot. So I'm going to keep the timeline. So I'd love to, we're going to walk through and talk about what you guys do on a day-to-day basis in your classrooms and where you see this technology transforming what you do in your classroom. So Karen, maybe I'll start with you. And if you could just introduce what you've done.
I'm Karen Matthews. Professor in the Department of Art and History. I'm an art historian, but more specifically an architectural historian. And I have been teaching art history for 35 years or so. And I have wanted for so long as an architectural historian to be able to show my students actual buildings. The sort of old-fashioned way was to create a set of slides, a sequential set of snapshots, and then the student had to conceptually put that building together in their mind. When I heard about the XR initiative, I was there knocking on the door when they were starting, because this was my chance. I finally had the chance to allow my students to inhabit the building, to experience the space, to understand the sort of grandeur and the scale of architecture, and to experience it in time as well. So architecture is a study where you need to take time to go through the space. So XR allows me to show my students architectural structures in their entirety and for them to really get an understanding of the context. So this has been absolutely essential in my teaching and pedagogy, and I've been given the opportunity here to do so. So maybe what you lose perhaps is that idea of presence, but one can think of the simulacrum of the virtual space as the first taste, and then you can actually go and experience that space. You can go to the Acropolis or whatever it may be, Stonehenge, and see these spaces in person as well. One thing that XR does provide for my students in my classes that you may not get in the actual space is unmediated access. So in my art history survey class, my students can roam freely through Stonehenge. I don't know if any of you have been to Stonehenge. You cannot roam freely in Stonehenge anymore. Maybe sheep can, but humans cannot. The same goes for the Acropolis. You get too close to something, there are these horrible shrill whistles that the guards blow at you. No touching. So in essence, one could say that the virtual experience might actually be better than the real. But the idea is to not have them as a replacement, but as a complementary set of experiences of an architectural space.
I love the complementary experiences. That's great. Bill, your work focuses on religion and ancient cultures. How have you seen the XR transform what it is you do and where we're headed?
Thanks. I'm Bill Green. I'm in the Department of Religious Studies. I've been teaching religion in universities for almost a half a century. And XR has transformed everything. If there is one aspect of human experience that is fundamentally and primarily experiential, it's religion. So we built a course with Professor Grinfeder from interactive media, Professor Hector from the School of Architecture, and I worked together to create a course on religion and sacred space in artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And it's built on the assumption or the claim that's made that we humans require the capacity, the experience of what is called non-ordinary reality. We can't stand to live in the world of work all the time. We need to get out of it. We get out of it through art, we get out of it through music, we get out of it through sports, and one of the primary ways we get out of it is through religion. And once you take that notion of non-ordinary reality and put that lens on for the metaverse is a quintessential example of non-ordinary reality because it gives you, in many ways, unbelievable maximum freedom to invent yourself, to create spaces with no gravity, no constraints, to create experiences. And so what we did is we created a course in which students, architecture students, interactive media students, students of religion and humanities, work together to create sacred spaces, scriptures, rituals that they performed together. That is, we had multiple teams who created completely different worlds, different ideas, and different rituals, and then all of us went through and experienced the whole thing together. So that all of the elements that we've been talking about today sort of came together in this course. I mean, it was individualized, it was spatially distinctive, and it created incredible opportunities for freedom, and the students didn't in any way imitate one another. Some of them changed their avatars on a day-to-day basis. Some students said they felt freer in their avatars than they do in daily life. One student said, I've always wanted to have pink hair, and now today I can have pink hair. We learned about the different environments. We learned about the way rituals create a sense of community and how powerful that can be. And it was really quite exceptional because the students were doing it all simply by learning the sort of general framework of non-ordinary reality and what could you do and how could you create a system of rituals and space that allowed people to experience a different kind of reality that takes them in. And that was the work. We've done it for 5 years. The Fetzer Institute from, I think in Michigan, heard about this course and picked it up, and we published some materials on it. It's a really interesting course, and that's how the metaverse, that's how virtual reality and AI have changed everything. And I think the more we allow students, exactly to the kinds of things that Karen just said, the more we allow students to experience the things that we only read about, the different kind of learning is going to take place, and it's going to be very powerful.
Thanks, Bill. And I always love the idea of continuously being curious. And every time I talk to you, that's one thing that come up. It makes me more curious. Danny, you're working in anatomy and kinesiology, and you're working with some VR tools like virtual medicine. And I wonder what your experience has been, or what your feedback has been with the students, and how have you seen this technology transform some of the work that you're doing? Turn it up. There's a button.
Is it on? Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Sravite. I'm with the School of Education and Human Development. There I teach physiology and anatomy courses for the kinesiology department. And most of these courses are, really hard, right? They are science-based, and we are always trying to look ways to engage the students. And I was happy today to hear some of the, key concepts that at the end of the day, we need to read the room. Read our students, find a way to understand their expression, so we can make, the learning experience a little more meaningful at the individual level. So after the pandemic, I was stuck. My students were, a little bit, flat. We turned everything into videos, into audios, no personalization. When we went back, it was hard to engage them again, especially with hard courses. For example, anatomy, the easiest part is the memorization. You can memorize stuff. right? But then to represent, those 2D images and convert them into a 3D understanding of the human body was really hard. Of course, we have courses like, gross anatomy, where you do the practice, but we have one full body per semester for entire group, meaning that, we are limited. So that's where, in my search of engaging students and finding tools, thanks, to Kim and Tom, we got the support and we started using, at the beginning the idea was to develop an app, but we realized that we were like years behind for that, and we needed many resources for that. So we started using softwares available on the market, virtual medicine, among others, and the way I did, I introduced it, slowly into the classroom, combining, we have in the classroom, of course, the theory component, we have, the practical component with traditional models, plastic models, with the legs, arms, heart, all of that. And then we introduced VR, along, augmented reality. So we started creating rotations, so students had different experiences. And also, I realized that this was not for everybody. At the beginning, I was trying to push it really hard. This is the best thing in the world. Yeah, and then I realized that some students, first of all, some of them, they don't like, the digital component. Yeah, they are more traditional. Some of them, they get, cyber sickness. Yeah, it's normal. So until we found the sweet spot, finding rotations, and the feedback so far from students that they really like it. They are engaged. They have, the critical points for me is that they have more contact time in practice. At the end of the day, we try to create these, practicums and create, exposure to these, options, but it's really limited when we have, one lab and we need to share it. So VR allowed me to expand the contact time per student, and by default, they have a better experience, they can practice more, they decrease their stress level in a course, in the nature of the course that's really stressful, anatomy. They get, it's super hard. By the third class, they need to remember all this. How I'm gonna go back and practice, yeah? So in that aspect, it's been really beneficial for my students. They have really good, feedback about the utilization, but at the same token, the understanding of the student is still critical for me. The feedback, even Monica was talking about creating the AI where it can read, the individual, but, this about feeling the room. Is he falling asleep? Yeah, maybe yes, I should wake up. So that's still critical. For me, education, even we work in a group setting, still at the individual level, should be the most critical point when moving forward.
That's great, and making sure that what you're doing is meaningful and is obvious in the work that you're doing. It's really impactful. So Shai, you're bridging the gap between digital technologies and cultural awareness. You work in languages, you work across cultures. Can you tell us a little bit about how you sort of started that journey and the work that you're doing utilizing XR?
Sure, and thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kim, for organizing all of this. It's beautiful. And my name is Shai Cohen, a modern languages and literature, in conjunction also with Sephardic studies in the Miller Center for Contemporary Judaic Studies. I started, if we think about what brought me here, then it's pretty much 25 years of living in 10 different countries as a complete immigrant most of the time. And I think each and every one of us here will understand the power that being in a different country has. So when you have, when you travel, especially if you're a type of immersive traveler, like Todorov was saying, and then you have this engagement, this immersive engagement from cultural perspective, from language perspective, and that's kind of like what I wanted to bring to the classroom, to present to the students. I wanted to present what I learned from languages, from immersive languages. So that's what I tried to do. I brought it from cultural immersion. So if you go here to the Richter Library, there's the exhibition about the golden age of the Jews of Al-Andalus. So 12th century, how do we bring that? How do we present that to students of today with all the difficulties? So thanks to UM Verston, we brought up Maimonides, and we brought up a synagogue from Toledo. And actually, that all started because I talked to Karen in the beginning, so thank you also for that. And then with languages, it's also quite obvious. I mean, we know that it's very hard to learn a language, a foreign language in your own country. So the best thing to do would be study abroad like we have here. So how do you present study abroad into the students? So you bring it into via the immersive, of course, experience in VR. In that, from that perspective, I think that the immersive experience changed the person. The experience that they remember afterwards is not the same as if they will go to a classroom. And I think this is where the most important impact has. And then there's another component, so the cultural immersion and the language immersion, but then there's another component of the performative and reflection immersion. And that, I think, is a crucial part. When we talked a little bit here, for example, how do you do in a job talk in a foreign language? So for that, VR, I think also, VR, AR is very crucial. And not only that, and I think many times when it was mentioned here about the critical thinking, but for me this is essential, because the difference when I try that without the reflective component of post-experience, it has nothing to do as when the student go through the immersive experience, read the comments, assess the situation, go through that again, and then write about it. From that will stay forever. For what I experienced with the students, that is a game changer for how we perceive VR, at least from the performative immersion component.
Thanks so much, and I'm very proud to shout out. The Golden Age of the Jews project was an Augie Award finalist this year, so I'm very proud of that. For me, to play a small part, but Shai's brainchild, it was wonderful. So this is more of a question for the group. We're talking across different subject areas, right? Art history and religion and kinesiology and world languages and culture. So I wondered if you guys could think, what's something that in your teaching you could see as would be a common reason across classrooms, regardless of the subject area, that would be beneficial from an XR perspective? Open to the group.
For me, the number one reason, at least in my area, is engagement. We were talking about how hard it is to keep everybody engaged today. So finding the tool that in the subject area that is hard, or any area, and that you can keep students engaged. And I try that with my students in different ways, right? Make partners. One with a headset, the other one giving instruction, questioning each other. Working alone with the software, and it was fascinating. For example, last week I walked into the classroom. After 10 minutes, I had students, grabbing stuff in the air. I had 25 students going like this. So for me, that was an aha moment. That was like, say, okay, there is something. I don't know if it's the best thing in the world. It's going to change in the next 10 minutes, probably. Technology. We have to adapt. We agree on that, the adaptation has to be faster than ever nowadays, but that engagement, is for me critical.
Just maybe I can follow up on that side, because I had, so in the VR, in the AR, the augmented reality that we have in Virtual Library, I bring different groups. One of the groups was like also from the Peace Corps, the retirees of the Peace Corps, and in one of the groups, there was the elderly, and when you see a person, I've never seen a person that happy before. And like what you were saying, and then with the hands in the air. So there was one picture that I really liked that I managed to take a photo of, and that is a person trying to take a picture of the avatar. In this case, it was Maimonides. So with the headset, trying to take a picture, for me that was a really game changer picture, because then you realize how powerful it is, this immersive experience.
And I was just going to add on to that, there is the possibility of wonder. I think it's so fabulous. Maybe it doesn't get as far as awe, but just, I don't know, the excitement of being in a different place and seeing things in a different way. Taking yourself, I was related to what Bill said, taking yourself out of your current reality and moving into another space and fully inhabiting that can be so liberating, can be so freeing, and can be incredibly pedagogical as well. You can learn so much from that experience. So it may sound a little simple, but wonder is a fabulous thing.
This one's on. See? There's no eternal life to this. I think that one of the things we learned about as we put this course together, it picks up on what everybody's saying. We live in the metaverse all the time. We dream every single night. We have to dream. It's built into our biology to dream. The dreams take us somewhere else. Dream is not something you sit down at the dinner table and plot out the dream. I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, wherever I go to sleep. I'm going to think this, and then 20 minutes later I'm going to think that. We go places. You see people you didn't know. You see relatives you knew once upon a time. You go to places. We find the idea of getting out of the material, concrete constraints perfectly natural. How many people saw Ready Player One? You know when that book was written? When was that book written? Long time ago, right? 20 years ago? That book was written before any of this technology existed, and they described it exactly, which means it was totally plausible, right? And so there's something foundational about the metaverse that lets us go somewhere we need to go. The difference between the metaverse and dreaming is that we have control in the metaverse. I can make myself into something else, and I can experience something in a way it's not like being there totally physically, although once you get these haptic suits, it's going to be close to that. But it's a way in which you can shape an environment without any kinds of constraints and learn some things about yourself that you might not be able to learn in any other way. I just want to share one thing a student in our course said at the end, which I'm going to quote so I don't screw it up. She said, "The journey of self-discovery," which is what a lot of students said was happening in this course, "couldn't be more beautiful and simultaneously couldn't be more difficult." And I think once you go and see a place and make a place, you begin to see things about yourself that it's hard to know what other realm you do it in, because you have an incredible way of freedom, and then it will affect the way you learn and the way you understand. So those two things go together. The potential is for learning is simply extraordinary.
Beautiful. The journey of self-discovery couldn't be more beautiful or difficult. It's great. It's great. So I have my own ideas about, I teach as well, as some of my students are here in VR and AR. I wondered from you guys, and there are we have a number of people from universities looking to do more of this, looking to work in it. And I know they'd like to hear, and we always like to discuss, what are some of the barriers you see to adopting this XR technology in the classroom? What are the things we have to overcome or keep in some relative place?
One of the challenges I find is that we are basing all this, experience on visual, experience. We are kind of, negating, actually some auditive experiences as well, but we are negating the other senses. So, for example, in anatomy and human development, it's super important to understand some perception, texture. We know that, the knowledge transfers from VR to another courses. We have already that data. And it helps students. We know that mixing models, or blended courses are good, but what's the missing link? Adding more perceptive, experiences, for example, in our area.
I think there's pluses and minuses. For AI, it's important that we remember that AI is a language built for language transformation. Yes, everybody knows. So if you want to really be effective with AI, we have to know the language better than it does. Or else you can't give it the kind of prompts that you need to get from it and what you have to get out of it. So one of the things that we have to do as educators with our students is make sure that the things they read, that they know what the words mean and really important. AI can be incredibly effective, but if you write the wrong word in the prompt, you're going to get an answer that may have nothing to do with what you really want to know. So it's really important to do that. I think that's number one. Number two, different kind of risk. I was talking to one of the guys in the earlier. AI can become an object that it can both liberate you and it also can constrain you. So he's explaining the programs that put religions in an AI framework. And a clergyman said, I'm not comfortable with that. Well, you can see why. You could look at a biblical figure and say, that's what Abraham looks like. That's what Abraham sounded like. That's what Jesus looked like. That's what he said. And fixate on that image. It's different from a statue, it's different from a text. So we have to understand how to use this as a means of liberation, because it has the risk of, does that make sense what I'm saying? It's the risk of locking us into something without helping us figure it out.
Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think that it's, for me at least, it's a conversation. I mean, it's obviously it's never one thing. So in my classes, it's a conversation between skepticism of the students to what they will confront, like you said about the difficulty, and of course hardware. So how to put the headset in which way, it doesn't work, and because the expectations are so high, and there's a lot of skepticism about it, then every little thing in the hardware immediately causes them to retract and say, oh, so it doesn't work. And I think we all came across it in one way or another in what we're doing. And one other thing that is probably very, very important, and that's a cultural thing that I noticed coming to the US, is the issue of how many, so in Europe, I was teaching for about 15 years in Europe, and you don't really need to give a lot of instructions. And here, if it's not down to the letter, then the students immediately is like, what do I do? I'm confused. And I was like, yeah, but this is problem solving. There's a reason why, where I also teach internships, so there's there's a lot of research about job seekers, and there's a reason why number one now, for when you want to be hired, the requirement for the number one, the 87%, is solution-oriented, problem solving. And what used to be very high, which was foreign languages or language and culture, and now it dropped to 6.4. It's like literally the bottom of the scale. So what I try to do in my classes to overcome those problems is precisely connect those two dots from the number one and the last one.
Thanks. I want to leave. I'm sorry.
Can I just say one more point? Daniel made already as well, is that universal application of XR technologies is not necessarily the way to go. I mean, it needs to be a case-by-case basis where you can really prove the pedagogical efficacy of using these technologies instead of just having gadgetry. And it's a decision you have to make. So in my classes, even the class where we do predominantly NPR, we have days where we come back together and sit and work in groups. I mean, we go from really, really basic to the technology rich, and I think it makes for a good combination.
Yeah, you hit on my next question, and I really answered some of it. Well, one of them was like, how do we balance the newest VR tools in terms of, and I want to leave time for questions, but how do we balance like, oh my God, this is such cool technology, as opposed to the efficacy of what it is, purposeful pedagogy. So I've heard a couple of you talk about that, but like, how do you run that balance? Because it's never one or the other. Like it tends to run somewhere in the middle, and you really need to make assessment of that. So how do you balance that?
I think it's really hard because every single group, every single classroom is different, and these students have different needs. So going back again to our capacity to read the students, to understand what they need, and putting ourselves, our ego, and being humble to say my selection of tools is not going to be the best fit for everybody is super important. So sometimes, as Ellen was saying, going back to the roots, just simple explanation with 2D image, integrating some technology. I try to be as flexible as my mind allows me. Yeah, believe in myself, I'm humble enough, to understand everything, but we still, are subjective in those selections. So when we create the syllabus, when we, time, how much content we're gonna put on that hour, and what tools are we gonna use, we are already making a selection for the students. And so what I like to do is to get feedback halfway through, every couple of weeks. Hey, how you like it? And you know what? Sometimes I allow, since I have the ability to have some practical time in my classroom, during that time I do it individual. You like more VR? You like more AR? You like to sit next to me and go over the two? We do it. So that's the way.
Good on. I think one of the things that we also need to remember that you understand that in the God gave us in pain, as you know, because everything. We now live in a world that is possible to listen and calm anymore to say, take a walk, listen to the question is, someone said, how much of what you listen to a book you actually remember lately? I think there are cognitive differences between experiencing our grace and understanding how it was built. Even though you may see it, you just not going to smell. So I think the difference between reading what you read, what you learn when you read, in conjunction with what you learn when you experience, it's the marriage approach can be based on learning intellectually, which if you're only doing one or the other, when you're both available, you're depriving yourself of a valid learning experience and really empathy. So if you can go to a place in the metaverse and have the experience, and then you can't spend it as you spend it, it's really cool and incredible. But because the language that help you put this there and enthusiasts actually having an authentic experience, go with somebody who was like on the diet, those things so together, and that's what you remember the conversation. So it's those things that can go together, which by depending on what you teach them, what you want, what you want to learn, is how you follow these two things, these flows of decision.
So two things, Bill, I think we're going to definitely become best friends. What you just said now, it's exactly what I have noted, that the XR works best when it stops being impressive and starts being invisible. So when students forget the actual tool and start thinking about the experience or living the experience, which reminds me of a podcast that I was listening yesterday of the creator of OpenClaws, Steinberger, with Lex Friedman, and he was saying about the age of lobster, what he was saying about the new age, Bill, as well. The age of lobster, and I really like that thing. So I played with it a little bit with the AI, and it came out something like a lobster grows by shedding its shell. For a moment, it is soft, vulnerable, exposed. That is where language education is today, or I would say any kind of AI education, pedagogy, when agentic application like OpenClaw can now perform tasks, generate language, act in complex environment on our behalf. The old shell of memorization no longer holds. It feels quite destabilizing. But growth rarely feels safe when agentic systems like OpenClaw can now reason, plan, and act with language. We cannot pretend that language learning is still about recall. So our task is not to resist the shedding, it is to guide students through the vulnerable space between shells.
Love the metaphor.
That was AI.
That was great. So I'd love to, I know we're go on time, but I'd love to give this opportunity for questions of our panel. We have one over there. Can we have
Thank you for this excellent panel. I have two questions. The first one is, what happens if a student doesn't attend because he or she is sick and cannot be part of these activities? How can they learn what was instructed during that class? And the second question is whether your midterm and final exam has changed, whether the approach has changed or not, or you are using the same approach.
In my case, I give them the freedom. The ones that get cyber sickness or they don't feel like to, they have the freedom. So I create rotations, and they get different experiences. So they will replace it. Do you like more the physical model? We go more time with the physical model, or even with AR. Yeah, and it's not part of, in my case, of the testing modalities.
In my case, I didn't mention that before, I'm the director of MLL Lab, so they have the space, and if they cannot come to the session itself, they can come any other moment during the semester to complete the task, at least if it's one specific task, and then we can talk about it later.
Part of it depends on how much time, because if it's one week, this month, then there's a whole set of things they haven't tried to experience. So we do our best to make sure that they can catch up on things in class, they can do something independent that they can do in class. One of the virtues of this is that you can have a VR experience by yourself, even if you have to go to a place where you can see what it's done. So what was the second part of the question? Well, our final exam is based on the ritual, based on the scripture, on the ritual, which everybody goes through. All the students go to each level. So if you go to one place where you go on a mountain, you go to another place where you go on the water, you go to another. And all of these different experiences, that's the final. It's the construction of it. So it's the best.
I wouldn't say that the exams have changed, but it is a challenge to take notes, for example, in VR. So the Quest 3 headsets have a pass-through where you can actually load it. It's pretty effective in terms of doing that. But then, the question is, how do you recall all of the information that you're gathering in that virtual environment if you can't really write it down? So that does present a challenge, and I said the pass-through to some degree resolves that, but it's an ongoing issue.
I think we have time for one more. I think someone.
Hi, Julia Scott. I'm coming here from California, and in the left coast, Burning Man is basically a sacred space. And so this question for Dr. Green, and one of the ways Burning Man has extended its sacred, well, what would be argued as sacred space as those who go really see it as a spiritual journey in that time and always come back transformed in some way. Big Rock Creative Production Studio, they created a metaverse version of the playa and update it each year with the artworks and architecture that is planned for that upcoming summer. So I was wondering, for your purposes in the religious studies, how do these newer, non-traditional sacred spaces that are actually transient play into what you teach?
Well, one of the things that the students, when they create the sacred space, some of their spaces are nature. And in fact, some of them have built rituals around nature. Some of them are collective, where they all do it together. And some of them are separate, where you have a space and everybody goes and meditates in one place or another. So that the idea that nature by itself can be a sacred space is pretty important. One of the things we did early in the course was to get them used to design and say, design your ideal classroom. It was very interesting in Florida, right? Florida. Most of their classrooms were outdoors. Near the ocean, the mountains, with all the technology, but wanting to be outdoors. We also discovered when we shifted locations, right? Sitting around the table in a boardroom having a discussion, and then we shifted the place and moved to a campfire at night. The entire conversation changed. It got quieter, more intimate, more direct, more open, and then you see what happens. Your brain says, I went from here to here. So you said, remember when we went and said we didn't went anywhere, you were sitting in the same chair. We just, but our experience, our experience is that we didn't. So the answer is, there are sacred spaces for lots of religions. There are places in the world, in nature, that are sacred, where things
you don't do there, or things that you only do there, that make them sacred. So, or you remember, so that date is perfect, if they would update it, that makes perfect sense.
I could talk to you guys all day, so I really appreciate it. These guys will be with us for the next hour, couple hours, so please go ask them some questions. I'm putting you on the spot. I cannot thank you guys enough. Please join me in a round of applause for my esteemed guests.